Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnava Bhadavahan Kavaraj Gacharya Sasa Sishvad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Samsara Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namachar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sugaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopila Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Namadab Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai Go Premanandi. All glory to some of the devotees, all glory to some of the devotees, all glory to some of the devotees, all glory to Sri Guru and Sri Guranga, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Pashatyare Shatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 3, Verse 14. Iti vigyapato devaya Bhagavan Atma Bhurnirpa Parito Brigu Dakshadhyaya Yayo Jait Eshwarasramam. Iti, thus, Vigyapita, informed Devai, by all the demigods, Bhagavan, most powerful, Atmabhu, O Lord Brahma, was born from the lotus flower. Nirpa, O king. Parita, being surrounded. Bhrigu, by Bhrigu. And Daksha, Ajay, and others. Yayo went. Daitya Ishvara, Hiranikasipu, king of the Daityas. Asramam, to the place of austerity. Translation, O king, being thus informed by the demigods, the most powerful Lord Brahma, accompanied by Bhrigu, Daksha, and other great sages, immediately started for the place where Hiranyakasipu was performing his penances and austerities. Purport, Lord Brahma was waiting for the austerities performed by Hiranyakasipu to mature, so that he could go there and offer benedictions according to Hiranyakasipu's desire. Now, taking the opportunity of being accompanied by all the demigods and great saintly persons, Brahma went there to award him the benediction he desired. So, offering of benedictions is something that we often see done. Lord offers benedictions sometimes. Devatas offer benedictions. And of course, even kings will offer benedictions, whatever. So this is something that is sometimes done because people ask for things, and sometimes because they even don't ask, they are offered certain things. Often, of course, it is because they ask. So this is the case predominantly with the devatas. People will worship devatas because they want to ask the devata for some material asset. That's the benediction or whatever. But the devata will not give that benediction unless that person does something to please the devata. So there are many things you can do to please the devata. The devata is pleased by worship, offering things. And in this way, you show your dedication to the devata, and the devata will respond. So this is the prescribed form of worship. You worship in order to please. And if you do it according to Scripture, then the deity should be pleased, and then the deity will give you something. So you do the worship according to the scriptural injunctions, and then you get some result for it. So worship is one way. Another is austerities, and this is quite common. Not only in India, but around the world, people do austerities in religion in order to get some benediction. And of course, it is quite, quite popular in India to do austerities in order to get benedictions. The idea there, of course, is that by doing the austerity, you're voluntarily creating some problem for your body. Tapas is austerity. Tapas actually means pain. So it is a voluntary infliction of pain upon your body. Now, what use is that, we would say, because it's uncomfortable, of course. But it represents the fact that we're willing to sacrifice our own comforts. We give up our comforts. So therefore, you do austerities in hope of getting some benediction from a devata, by showing how we are so detached from our material enjoyment, we're willing to sacrifice our enjoyment for the supreme, the devata or whatever. So this is quite common, doing austerities like this, and this is exactly what Hiranyakasipu did. He did great austerities, starving himself and standing on his tiptoes, etc. It is also, of course, on a lesser level, we'll see that done even now. People do vratas for a certain period of time. So there is, in South India, a very common vrata now is the Ayappa vrata. So far, I think 1 month they will be brahmachari. I think they don't take any non-veg food. And they do worship every day. They walk around with bare feet. They wear black cloth, whatever. I don't know if that's an austerity, but anyway, they wear black cloth. And then if they can, they walk up the hill to see Ayappa. So they do it for 1 month. They do some austerity, refraining from meat, fish, eggs, etc., smoking, drinking, austere life for 1 month. But, of course, they're trying to get something. They're asking for something for that austerity. So it's an attempt to please that particular devata. They want to restrain their material senses in favor of worship of the Lord or the devata. So even now, there are many type things. Of course, there's the more popular one they just had in India also. This is, I guess it's for Kartikeya, is it? Where they stick the needles in their tongues and hooks in their backs and all like that. It's banned now, of course, but they used to do that, put all sorts of hooks in your tongues and your ears and whatever, in your nose and whatever. Drag rathas like hooks on your back, and your back like this. Sort of do it in Malaysia and India also. So this is another type of austerity you do for. Another is walking on fire. Do that also, walk on fire. So all sorts of things, but not only in India. Around the world, they also do such things, austerities or whatever. In Christianity, they do. I think Islam, they also do. So we shouldn't think that this is something extraordinary because it's a common practice. So austerities and vratas are attempts to please devatas to get some material benediction. We want something. And that devata, because he's in charge of certain material affairs, he becomes pleased. And then he gives you something for that. So that's the general procedure. And, of course, it is also there in the scriptures. It's not completely concocted. So we have scriptural references to a lot of this. Some of it, of course, is concocted, but some of these austerities they may do. But there is, the idea of doing austerity, doing worship, doing vratas, etc., for pleasing a certain devata. Then you can ask for something. And it is material. And thus, the devotees will avoid such things. But for persons who are attached to the material world, it is useful. Yeah, we say it's a clever arrangement of the Supreme Lord to entice these people to do some austerities and control their senses for a limited period of time. So they do a vrata to get a result. And then, of course, ultimately it is condemned because it's useless. We do austerities, we get the result, then we enjoy. So it's not real austerity, but the attempt is there by the Lord to, if they keep practicing like this, gradually they'll become a little more austere by nature. And in this way they can advance by controlling their senses. And that actually is the purpose of the whole varnashram system. It's a series of rules by which you have to control your senses to various degrees. Less on the lower level, so Sudras don't have too many rules to follow. And as we go up from the Vaishya, Kshatriya, and then to Brahmana, they have more rules to follow. So very strict rules for the Brahmana. Everything in life is regulated by rules for him, in an attempt so that you can control your senses more and more and more. Get rid of material enjoyment, and consequently, we end up in sattva gun, and then we can concentrate on spiritual life. So that the whole purpose of all that type of austerity is ultimately to raise us through the gunas and get us to the position where we can become aware of Atma and practice spiritual life. So it does have some purpose. But of course, in the Bhagavatam itself, I just explained in the first canto how Vyasadeva actually recommended this for people. So he wrote 18 Puranas. And in the 6th of the Puranas, he glorifies Shiva. And says, worship Shiva. Get all your desires fulfilled for people in Tamagun. And for people in Rajagun, he advises them worship Lord Brahma. Rajagun, he's in charge of creation. And he will fulfill your desires. As we see here, he fulfills Hiranyakasipu's desire. And if you're in Sattva-gun, then you worship Vishnu to fulfill your desires. Of course, in Sattva-gun, you have much less desires. But this was we can say, just following what's there in Karmakanda section of the Vedas, etc. So the Puranas were, Vedavyas wrote the Puranas to encourage people in that way. According to your gunas, worship certain devatas, get certain benedictions, and then by doing that worship and those austerities and those vratas, eventually get purified and raise up into gunas. But he also detected that something wrong with this system. It's not very good because ultimately people get attached. So then Narada Muni came and said, yes, you wrote all the Puranas, you wrote the Mahabharata, you wrote the Brahma Sutras, you divided the Vedas up, you did all this work, but it's not practical for the people of Kali Yuga. Because people of Kali Yuga are not very intelligent, and they have very short goals. They can't think of long-term goals. They won't be able to understand what you're saying or trying to do in the different scriptures to raise them up in consciousness. They're very materially attached. So consequently, they will worship Shiva at the bottom in Tamagun, and they won't progress. They won't go up to Rajagun and Sattvagun at all. They'll just get stuck in the lower gunas because they don't have intelligence and they're too attached to material energy. Plus, they have short lifespans, so within one lifetime, they can't progress too much also. So he said, it's not a very good system. So then he says, better you simply tell everybody to worship Krishna. Don't worship devatas at all. And don't even worship Vishnu. Worship Krishna. Of course, the argument became, well, Vyasadeva understood people are in different gunas, so they're attracted to different things. So people in Tamagun are attracted to Shiva because he's in charge of Tamagun. People in Rajagun will be attracted to Brahma. He's in Rajagun avatar. People in Sattvagun are attracted to Vishnu. So it's not natural. We're going to tell Tamagun people to worship Krishna. How is that possible? Because they're in Tamagun. So that can be an argument against Narada Muni's advice. But Krishna, why Krishna? Because Krishna is all attractive. He's attracted to everybody. Tamagun, Rajagun, Sattvagun, Nirguna. So of course in the Bhagavatam it also says, related to the story of Sukadeva, who was not attached to anything. He was Atmarama, even beyond the gunas, and therefore kind of attached to Brahman. He got attracted to Krishna also. Vyasadeva's disciples recited the Bhagavatam, and then Sukadeva Goswami's samadhi broke, and he wanted to hear more about Krishna. So Krishna's attracted to all people, the people in the topmost level, the impersonalists and whatever, fixed in samadhi without any material attachment, and those are the lowest gunas in Tamagun. Krishna's attracted to everybody. So therefore he told, Narada told Vedavyas, you write a Purana in which everybody is directed simply to worship Krishna. So no more worship of devatas or rising through the gunas or anything. Just worship Krishna. Finished. Because he's all attractive. So that is what the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam is. Vedavyas had already written 18 Puranas, so he took one Purana and he revised it and made the Bhagavatam as we know it. So in this work, therefore, there is not worship of devatas and Shiva and Brahma or whatever and Vishnu, just worship of Krishna finally. So that's the advice that Narada Muni gave to Vedavyas. So in other words, all of these austerities to get benedictions, etc., is not so useful anymore for purifying yourself. And of course, Krishna says the same thing in Bhagavad Gita. Yeah? People who worship devatas are fools. It's all temporary results, so it's foolish. So. But there's a concession given to them by the Vedas, Karmakanda, etc., and Vedavyas writing Tamagun Puranas, Rajagun Puranas, etc. Concession is given, but even that concession doesn't work too well in Kali Yuga, our Kali Yuga particularly. So therefore, everybody should simply worship Krishna. That's the final advice of Narada Muni, and consequently Vedavyas. So all of this worship, therefore, that people do, we can say is secondary. Of course, it is also said, don't criticize the devatas. This is one of the angas of bhakti, actually, mentioned in Nectar of Devotion. Don't criticize the devatas. Another is Shruti Shastra Ninda. Don't criticize the Shrutis. And a lot of the Shruti is Karmakanda, worship of devatas. So don't criticize them. So in one sense, yes, we don't criticize because it's part of the Vedas. But even Krishna criticizes. He says, the flowery words of the Vedas, what is all of this nonsense? People get distracted by this. So, yeah, we understand the Vedas have a certain purpose, but at the same time, we also understand in Kali Yuga, none of that is practical anymore. So we want to give the best advice to the majority of the people for their own benefit. So therefore, worship Krishna. That's the final conclusion. So in this way, though the Devata worship is there, it is discouraged. So we'll see that often in the Bhagavatam, the worship of Devatas is put in a much lesser position. And in this case, we find Hiranyakasipu, a big demon, worshipping Lord Brahma. Of course, we find that, again, Ravana, he worships Shiva. So great demons also, they're seeming to be following the Vedas because they're worshipping Devatas, following Karmakanda, whatever. But so not so good, because you're supposed to get purified by this, but they're not getting purified at all. The big demon's goal is not purification. It's sense enjoyment only, which was the whole danger that Narada Muni criticized. People will worship Devatas and get the results, and they get stuck in that enjoyment, and they won't progress. They won't become purified. So it is a little precarious, that whole system. And not only in our Kali Yuga, we see even here, same thing is happening with Hiranyakasipu. Okay, I want to get the highest position in the universe. I want to get even Brahma's position or whatever, so let me do great austerities. So in a sense, yeah, he's following some sort of scriptural thing, but really distorted. Yeah, because as a result of the austerity that he wants to upset the whole of Brahma's kingdom and whatever, take over his position. So that's crazy. Useless. Therefore, throughout the Bhagavatam, we'll find stories like this where people worship devatas and then get too much power, and then they do crazy things. Furthermore, we'll also find that though we do respect the devatas and we shouldn't criticize them or anything, and we find that the Bhagavatam also criticizes them. So Indra gets criticized because he poured rain on Govardhan and whatever, and Krishna and the cowherd people, etc., gave them all problems. And we see Brahma gets criticized because he tried to steal all the calves and cows, and then, he realized his mistake because Krishna was more powerful. So we see that even the devatas get criticized by Sukadeva Goswami and Vasudeva. So, but then, of course, that is a little bit countered because it's don't criticize them, don't think that they're at fault, because this is an arrangement of the Lord. But in any case, we see that positions of the devatas are on a lower level. And rather than worship them, we should worship Krishna. So here, Hiranyakasipu was trying to get some great benediction of controlling the whole world and even taking the position of Lord Brahma by doing austerities. In this case, because it's a high goal, he has to do more austerities. Brahma here has his plan, of course. So he goes there along with all the sages and devatas to witness Brahma, Hiranyakasipu, when he's finished his austerity so he can offer a benediction to him. Yeah? And we'll see there, when Hiranyakasipu asks for the benediction, he's very clever. He asks something which is impossible, almost impossible for Brahma, but he's asking something, how can I be immortal? But Brahma is equally clever, so he gives all these benedictions where he avoids giving him immortality, but it satisfies Hiranyakasipu, because he won't be killed on land, air, whatever, water, won't be killed in day or night, won't be killed by any weapon, won't be killed by a human or an animal, etc., etc. So they say, okay, I'm immortal. Huh? So, Hiranyakasipu, in other words, wants eternal enjoyment. But that's not possible, even for Lord Brahma. He also has to die. So the only possibility for eternal enjoyment is in the spiritual world. But the only way you can get that eternal enjoyment is to give up the enjoyment completely. Give all the enjoyment to Krishna. Then you get it, but otherwise you can't get it. Huh? So that is what the materialist is striving for, eternal enjoyment somehow or other for himself. And it will be impossible. He can never get that. The only way he can do it is by worshiping the Lord and surrendering completely. So therefore all of these plans of clever materialists are ultimately useless. Okay, any question there? Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for the wonderful class.
So, I'm not sure how correct this is. I have been told that in certain sections of the Vedas, certain demigods are noted as the supreme. Is that true? And if that is true, why?
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, we will find that in Puranas and Vedas, devatas are glorified. In the Tamasic Puranas, like the Shiva Purana, Shiva will be called Bhagavan, he's the supreme, or Brahma is called supreme, or whatever. And they get glorified, and they have all sorts of stories to show why she was superior to Vishnu, etc. It's scripture, so they say, it's true. But then we have a contradiction, because then the Sattvic Puranas say Vishnu is supreme. So what do? Everybody's supreme? Supreme means on top, not equal. They would say everybody's equal, but they don't. They say Shiva's supreme, or Vishnu's supreme, or Brahma's supreme, or whatever. Doesn't make sense. Okay? So therefore, the scriptures also have methods of solving contradictions. We can't have contradictions because the Vedas should be perfect. So there are various rules, but one simple rule is that if we have Tamasic Puranas, Rajasic Puranas, and Sattvic Puranas, the Sattvic Puranas are stronger proof if there's contradiction with the other Puranas. So if there's a statement in Sattvic Purana and Tamasic Purana and they're contradictory, Shiva's Bhagavan, Vishnu's Bhagavan, contradiction. Which is stronger? The Sattvic Purana statement is stronger. So we reject the lower statement in the Tamagun Purana or the Rajagun Puranas, and in favor of the Sattvagun Purana. So that's one rule we can follow. So that way we cover the contradictions and solve the contradictions.
Awesome.
Another one, of course, is within one work itself. We also have sometimes contradictions. Even in the Bhagavatam, sometimes Shiva is glorified in the prayers, you're Bhagavan, etc. Or sometimes impersonal Brahman is glorified even. The whole section by Kapila, and again by Krishna in the 11th canto to Uddhava, where he glorifies impersonal Brahman as the highest, whatever like that. In that case, we have to see the context of the total work. And then we'll see there's a contradiction. Because obviously Krishna is supreme, and he's not impersonal Brahman. So there's a contradiction there. So then we take the majority. What is the majority opinion? Krishna is supreme, he's got a form, qualities, activities, not impersonal, and therefore the statements about Brahman being supreme, they're there for certain purposes, not for saying the absolute truth. So by context also we have to see what is the true statement.
Would it be right in saying that maybe it's there for people who want to believe that?
Yeah. Yeah, so Bhagavatam is such, and Scripture in general is such that sometimes they will not speak directly anyway. So those who are in pursuit of the highest truth, they will get the highest truth, but they have to look for it. And those who want something else, they will get the superficial meaning. So Bhagavatam is also like that. It hides the truth from the materialists and gives them another version of Bhagavatam. And it gives rasa to the devotees, because they understand there's some deeper meaning there. So it's two-faced. So it's called Mohini. Like Mohini Avatar is so attractive that she can bewilder the demons and take the nectar from them and give it to the devatas. So in the same way, Bhagavatam will hide the nectar from the demons and give them something else, and give the nectar to the devotees. So the impersonalists can read Bhagavatam, and they'll pick up all the impersonal statements, and then say, okay, Bhagavatam is ultimately talking about impersonal Brahman, and Krishna is some, secondary. And those who want Varnashram or Karmakanda or whatever, they can look at those sections in the 3rd canto or 11th canto, describing the whole Varnashram system. This is ultimate. Or in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in chapter 3, Karma Yoga is the best, Arjuna. You should only do Karma Yoga. And worship the devatas and get material results. This is the best thing for you. But we see, of course, later on, Krishna says, worship devatas is useless. Chapter 9. So the contradictions are there, so we have to see what is the proper thing. So by the majority of the statements, we come to a good conclusion. But, Bhagavatam and other works, they will not say everything directly all the time also.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Varnashram system is supposed to purify people, yeah? So Varnashram system is in Vedas. So how come, all these, like you said, these Hiranyakashipu and Ravan, they actually did not get purified because they were doing Karmakanda. They were following Vedas, but Vedas is not for purification. But Varnashram Dharma is in Vedas, and that's for purification. Would that lead to... Because Bhagavad Gita says, Vedeshe sarve ahamave vedyo. Krishna says, all the thing from the Vedas is Krishna.
Well, Veda is not absolute, non-different from the Supreme Lord also, not just parts of it. And within there we have the Karmakanda, Varnashram, etc., also parts of it. But people can use them, and they tend to misuse them also, and then we get the wrong results. Of course, Bhagavatam says that the Varnashram system ultimately is to satisfy Vishnu, satisfy the Supreme Lord. So that's the ultimate goal. But people often lose that goal, and therefore they get caught in the system with all the rules, so they get stuck there, and they don't even get to the highest goal. So as I said, that's a little bit of a problem, because the goal is there, but because our lives are short, and we don't have so much intelligence, we tend to get stuck on part of it. We don't see the ultimate goal, we don't strive for that. So that's the problem with these indirect systems. So they're there for certain people, but ultimately the recommendation is better just do bhakti, since our life is very short. Get to the essence of what you're going through to get to bhakti and to the Varnashram system.
In Nanda we find that Devi Bhagavatam is spoken a lot.
Yes.
Who compiled Devi Bhagavatam, and how is it different from them?
Well, Devi Bhagavatam is not one of the 18, usually not accepted as one of the 18 Mahapuranas or major Puranas. So possibly we'll find it in the Upapurana. So there's 18 Upapuranas also. So it could be stuck there. People will claim, okay, it's Vedavyasa's work. So yes, it is common, but as I said, if we go by Bhagavatam itself, this is the final word because it was written after all the 18, and Narada Muni told Vedavyas to, come to the proper conclusion, so he wrote Bhagavatam. So whatever these other Puranas are and whatever they state, ultimately we should go by the authority of Bhagavatam. That Bhagavatam, not Devi Bhagavatam. The Krishna Bhagavatam.
In Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami says worship of Ganesh, then the banyan tree. How do you understand that increase the bhakti in devotees?
So the worship of Ganesh is mentioned there when it lists the rules save aparads, I think he worships. I list them there among the save aparads, you know. You can't avoid the worship of Ganesh before you do your puja. Deity worship particularly. And he's just simply quoting a Purana there, some Purana. And of course, in the beginning of the Angas of Bhakti, the Angas of Bhakti, we have this idea of worshiping the Asvata tree and the, Brahmana, etc. So what is all this for? That the one for the deity worship is taken from another Purana. Yeah? So, in some traditional worships, not Vaishnava worships, as is common to do the worship of Ganesh, Guru and Ganesh and so, so I guess before you do your puja. And I think it's even mentioned in Hare Bhakti Vilasa like that. So there is some sort of procedure. But generally the Vaishnavas will substitute something else for that. So, for instance, in the Sri Sampradaya, instead of Ganesh, they worship Vishvaksena. The Madhvas also, who is he looks like Ganesh because he's got an elephant head also. But he resides in Vaikuntha instead. And he's head of the army of Vaikuntha. So he gets rid of your obstacles also, but it's more on a spiritual level. So they say worship, this Vishvaksena instead. So that's the substitute in their terms. Right? So it's some sort of traditional thing which is there because it's quoted from a Purana, but generally we see that the devotees aren't going to follow that so much, or they substitute the worship of Vishvaksena instead. As for the other thing about worshipping Asvata tree, there's nothing wrong with Asvata tree because even in Bhagavad Gita that Krishna says of the trees, I'm the Asvata tree. So somehow he's kind of represented by the Asvata tree. So if we worship the Asvata tree, we're also worshiping Vishnu indirectly. But the idea there of that Anga of Bhakti is that we give respect to all living entities, plants, animals, and human beings. And then among those things, of course, then the Asvata tree is kind of in a higher position because it is non-different from Vishnu, according to Bhagavad Gita. And the Brahmana is the highest Varna, etc. The cow, of course, is also high animal, etc. So, like that, we worship all living entities. We give respect to all living entities.
Maharaj, you mentioned that following the orders of Narada Muni, Vyasadeva compiled the Bhagavatam from one of the existing Puranas. And this is my question. We see Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma in the Bhagavatam. Did you mention that the worship of the demigods is not in the Bhagavatam?
Oh, no, I didn't say that. Its worship is there, but finally the conclusion is that they're not supreme and we shouldn't worship them as the supreme. Yeah, definitely, this whole stories of Shiva, Brahma, etc., and other devatas also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, stories concerning them. But of course we see also that ultimately the conclusion is that Vishnu is higher than Shiva or Brahma, and we should only worship Krishna ultimately.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the wonderful class. I just had a question that if you distribute books or give this knowledge to materialists in, suppose, US, America, Australia,
Then
they
it's
just accept it like some ancient knowledge,
Yeah.
and then they accept it. But some people in India, they have strong bases on their demigod worshippers. They're really strong on that. So how do you explain them that Krishna is the greatest without offending their culture?
Okay. Well, yeah, people who have no knowledge, maybe it's easier for them to accept, and people who have some knowledge, which is the wrong knowledge, then they don't accept. I think I know everything already, so you're saying this is not true because, father said this, mother said this, the temple says this, so, well, how can this be correct? So people often do have that conception in India. Yeah. So, of course, we don't preach to the faithless. That's kind of aparad, preaching to the faithless persons. But then the counter argument, well, we don't preach to anybody, how we could spread Lord Chaitanya's movement. So the idea is Yeah, we can distribute Bhagavatam, etc., but generally we're looking for people who do have some little bit of favorable inclination at least. And if they do, and they read, and they find some little bit of a problem there, then they can do two things. If they're a little bit favorable, then they'll go to ask somebody else, ask a devotee, and the devotee can explain things nicely, and then they can listen, and then they can accept. If they are the opposite, they're not favorable, and then they get angry. And oh, this is all wrong, this is not proper. So that's why it becomes preaching to the faithless in a sense. And no matter what you say, they won't accept. So those people we kind of ignore. We don't try to preach to them at all. But if people are neutral or puzzled, then we can explain. And the easiest thing to explain is, yes, many scriptures are there, many scriptures say many things, but we should find out the highest scripture. So then we can convince them why Bhagavatam is the highest scripture, being the final work of Vedavyas. After he wrote the 18 Puranas and all the other works and compiled the Vedas, etc. Then finally he came out with Bhagavatam. So therefore it's the conclusion of everything. So people should accept. If you accept Vedavyas, accept the Bhagavatam. And they'll say, well, what about Devi Bhagavatam, Vedavyas, or Devi Bhagavatam also? I say, but it's Upapurana, it's secondary. This is Amala Purana. It's the last work of Vedavyas. So you have to accept the last work, superior. So if you accept the pramana of scripture, then you should accept the statements, not try to wiggle out by quoting some other scripture. No.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the nice class. You were talking about austerities, and I'd like to ask, how can Krishna be happy if we perform austerities? Because we see that he is our dearmost father, he's the father of the universe, and we see our material parents, they're also not happy when they are not pleased when we do something austere. So then how can Krishna be happy when we kids perform austerities for him?
How can Krishna be happy when?
When we kids, little kids, perform austerities for his pleasure.
By austerities. If we
Yeah.
do austerities,
Yeah.
how can Krishna be happy? Well, actually, the Vaishnavas are not too much interested in austerities. Maybe Hiranyakasipu or these type of people want to do austerities and stand on their toes for that. So this is not considered to be a proper austerity. We do extreme austerities of torturing the body, etc. It's actually considered tamasic. So you have to do scriptural austerities. So the austerity of the Vaishnava is Ekadasi. That's our ultimate austerity. That's our fasting. We fast on Ekadasi. So that far we can go. But if we do go to extremes, then of course obviously it's not prescribed in the scriptures, so therefore we don't follow that. So the austerities for the Vaishnava are not considered to be extreme austerities. They're in line with, devotion. So of course austerity, as I said, ultimately means restraining the senses. So yes, through bhakti we're restraining the senses by engaging the senses in serving Krishna. So that's pleasing to Krishna. But if we simply stop the senses, that type of austerity, or torture the body, that's not pleasing to Krishna. So also in the Bhagavad Gita it says that type of austerity where you give pain to the body, that you're actually giving pain to the Supreme Lord. It's not proper. The Lord doesn't appreciate that at all.
Thank you.
Maharaj, you were saying that we are meant to worship some demigods, as Prabhu was saying before, Ganesh or the banyan tree, because showing respect. But so does it mean that as Vaishnavas should we worship Ganesh in some occasion during the year, or is it okay to have a picture that honor him?
Oh, okay.
And also, a second part, sometimes when we check astrology and stuff, we recommend that maybe worship Buddha or chant this mantra for a while, even coming from Vaishnavas as well that are able to check astrology and that stuff. So how do we really understand that?
Yeah. Well, as for worshipping Ganesh or other devatas, you can do that as long as you worship them as servants of the Supreme Lord. in which case you don't give direct, you offer them the prasad from Krishna or Vishnu instead, then it's okay, you're not criticized or whatever. However, those who are more attached to Krishna, they don't want to be distracted by worshiping anybody else. So therefore they just worship Krishna. Don't worry about worshiping this, even other avatars even. They're not so interested in worshiping other avatars, even though it's bona fide. What to speak of devatas, because they're so absorbed in Krishna. Like the people in Vrindavan, they're not thinking of anything else, they're just thinking of Krishna all the time. So everything is a distraction. So those who are very advanced, therefore, only concentrate on Krishna. Those who are less advanced, okay, they can worship different forms of the Lord. And they can even worship devatas as long as they worship them as servants of the Lord, or Vaishnavas. And we also worship Vaishnavas, so we can do that. As for, astrology, etc., good to see what your karma is, in many cases, just like it's good to look at the weather today and see if it's going to rain or not rain or whatever. People look at the traffic and see where the traffic is too, so they don't waste time or whatever like that. Or they go to the doctor and see if they're going to get something or other in their lungs or a heart or whatever like that, so they can predict something by that. So astrology is like that also, it can give prediction, but we don't get too attached to it because it's all about the material body. But like going to the doctor, then the doctor gives you some medicine, you take it. So astrologers can also do that, but if he tells you to worship devatas and stuff, then we don't want to avoid that. We worship Krishna instead, or we worship but we don't want to also ask him, Krishna, please do this for me, do that for me. We just worship Krishna unconditionally and let him take care of it.
So on one hand, they don't desire even samipya from the Lord, like samipya association from the Lord, but yet they have a mood of separation from the Lord. So how is it possible they can have this contradictory?
Well, they don't desire closeness to the Lord devoid of service to the Lord, or sarupya, or salokya, or whatever. But they don't refuse it also if they're service to the Lord. So that main idea is you're serving the Lord, and in pursuit of that, the Lord brings you close, he shows his form, he gives you a form, and he puts you in the same loka, in the same area, or whatever, so you can serve him nicely. And so the devotee accepts that, because it's conducive for his service. So in that sense, they will accept those things. And then consequently, when we are close to the Lord, then there will be periods of separation and union. So that's all part of the rasa when you are serving the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, there are multiple statements Srila Prabhupada has made on this question, which is very commonly asked, that the jiva has fallen from the spiritual world, from Krishna's association, and then by practicing bhakti one can go back again, and that's it, no more falling back again.
Yeah.
And Srila Prabhupada has given multiple statements on that, but the famous one is that yes, we were with Krishna and we fell from the spiritual world. So what is the actual understanding on that? How to understand, take it?
Well, another statement is like the tall fruit falling from the tree, and the crow lands on the tree, and and then the fruit falls. So it was because of the crow or not because of the crow or whatever, like that. So you can go on endlessly debating back and forth on that. Of course, and then the other idea is that it doesn't really matter as far as if it was here or there or whatever. The idea is we're here now, and we got to get out. Doesn't matter how it happened, but we got to get out. So that's kind of the main idea. But the controversy arises, I would believe, because we are still influenced by our concepts of material time and space, and therefore we're thinking when and how and at a certain time and here and there. but spiritual time and the spiritual place are quite different. So you can't really argue about something which is eternal and infinite with no past, present, future, and try to correlate that with our idea of, past, present, future, or limited space and time, etc. So when we try to do that, we get in a little bit of a confusion. When I was here or when I was there. This is all our conceptions of past, present, future due to our conditioning. So therefore we get a little bit of a problem there.
I don't know if you saw that proposal.
Oh yeah, there's a proposal of that.
And the Hare Prasad
Yeah.
mentions that Prabhupada makes more than one statement, and they actually contradict each other.
Yeah.
And so do the Acharyas.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of those conundrums where we want a definitive statement, but then we find 3 or 4 and they differ. And so then we've got to kind of arrange our heads in such a way so that we can accommodate all of them.
Yeah.
And of course, what that means is that in a variety of circumstances, the truth will apply, but the situation will be different, and so therefore the statements are different.
Yeah.
Just on that point about worshipping the demigods, Prabhupada mentions, and I think the Bhagavatam mentions, that the spiritual master is the summum bonum of all of the demigods. And so when we worship the spiritual master, because he's the epitome of service to Krishna, then we're automatically worshipping the demigods anyway. And so we don't worry too much about the demigods because we've already satisfied them by serving Srila Prabhupada.
Of course, the other thing is everything is in Krishna anyway. And so like watering the leaves, we water the root. Everybody's satisfied. So worship Krishna, everything is fulfilled by that. Somebody? Oh. Oh, yeah. It's not there are any gunas as such. They're meant for people in the gunas.
Oh, okay. But
So Vedavyasa is transcendental, so he never doesn't write anything in Tamagun, but he's writing for the people in Tamagun, so he attracts them with Lord Shiva, who's the ruler of Tamagun.
How would you determine between the sattva and the rajas guna in terms of the Puranas?
It's listed. There's a listing in the Puranas themselves. They say these are in the Tamagun, these are Rajagun, Sattvagun, by prominence of who is the object of worship. So in the Tamagun Puranas, it's Shiva, generally Shiva, or Kartikeya, like that. And there's a lot of glorification there in those Puranas. Whereas Sattvic is, all Vishnu, like Vishnu Purana, Padma Purana, Garuda Purana, etc. And then the other ones, Brahmanda Purana, etc., glorify Brahma. So by prominence of who gets worshipped, then the system is there.
Thank you.
No? Okay. No?
Thank you so much, Maharaj. I have a question because usually people, when it comes to studies, engineering or medicine, they send their kids to overseas or they find out the best college and they send. But when it comes to Janmashtami or some, they say they go to their nearest temple. How can we help them? What's
they
the
go
best?
To what temple?
Nearest temple.
Nearest temple.
Yes.
Yeah. So?
But when it comes to college studies, medicine or engineering, they Google and find out the best college and they send even overseas. They don't care, even very expensive.
So they can't go to the temple anywhere.
But when it comes to temple, they go to the nearest temple.
Oh, they go to the college furthest away because they get better degree maybe.
Yeah. Even my brother, he sent his son to Singapore. It's equivalent to USA or Australia, very expensive.
Yeah, so what this shows is their material interests are stronger than their spiritual interests. To fulfill their material desires, they'll go further away and make further endeavor and pay more money. And for the spiritual thing, anything will do anything, so not so serious about spiritual life, in other words.
What is the best way to assist them?
Well, we can always, if they are a little favorable, then we can preach to them. We don't preach to the faithless, but if they have a little bit of, favorability, we can start. Let them at least hear the name. get them a little bit enthusiastic, and then eventually they get more interested, and then we can give them Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, etc. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Okay. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.